On Zombie Reddit, today's story is:
My parents denied me support for my cybersecurity company, but they financed my cousin's failed hotel. I am Zachary, I am 34 years old and I come from a well-off family. My father owns several businesses in the city, from properties to retail stores. My mother owns several buildings. My grandparents, although not as wealthy, were the true visionaries who worked hard to give my parents a good start. In our family, the expectations are clear: either you inherit the family business and keep it running, or you create your own empire. I wanted the second option. I wasn't a naive dreamer with unrealistic plans. I had a solid idea: a cybersecurity company. My interest began at the age of 14 when, by accident, I managed to break into my school's system to modify my disciplinary records. From then on, I was passionate about everything related to computers. I studied computer science at university and became obsessed with topics such as encryption, system vulnerabilities and programming. After finishing my studies, I realized that cybersecurity was not only an essential career, but also a very profitable one. All companies need it, from banks to hospitals. It's like selling umbrellas in a world where information is always leaking out. I had a clear vision, I knew who my potential clients would be, and I had prepared a presentation that I thought would impress anyone. However, there was one obstacle: I needed significant startup capital. I wasn't asking for millions, just enough to rent an office, hire a small team and invest in basic equipment. I could have started more modestly, but I had a very specific image of what I wanted the company to be like. One morning, I met my parents in the living room. I presented my idea to them with graphics, market research and all my enthusiasm. I asked them for a loan, not a gift, but money that I would pay back with interest when the business took off. Their response? "Zach, we love you, but we don't think you have what it takes to be an entrepreneur." They didn't mean it badly. My father sighed as if it pained him to say it, and my mother looked at me with that pitying expression that mothers have when they think you're being naive. My father explained to me that being good at programming doesn't automatically make you a good entrepreneur. Running a company involves dealing with accounts, employees, investors, losses and all those complicated parts of the business. According to them, I didn't have that special talent. What you're proposing is not an investment, it's a waste of money. It was a very hard blow. At first, I was furious. I didn't talk to them for several days and I locked myself in my room looking out of the window as if in a sad movie, but I didn't give up. A month after my parents rejected my proposal, my cousin Bernard was getting married. It was an elegant wedding that lasted 3 days, with champagne and all the trimmings. At one point, I was standing next to my parents near the buffet when Bernard approached. He greeted my parents, shook my father's hand and said, and I quote, "Uncle, Aunt, thanks again for believing in me and helping me with the money for my hotel. I couldn't have done it without you." Time seemed to stand still. I stared at Bernard as if he had said something incredible. My parents laughed nervously, said something polite and changed the subject quickly. I felt as if I had been punched in the stomach. They had said no to me, but Bernard was given money for a hotel, a whole hotel. I admit it, I'm not proud of what I did next. I excused myself with "I need to check something" and ran off. I ended up in a secluded corner of the hotel garden crying my eyes out. I felt betrayed, not because they helped Bernard, good for him, I suppose, but because they didn't want to do the same for me. And the worst part was that it felt personal, as if they trusted Bernard but their own son wasn't worth the risk. My grandmother found me sitting there. "Zachary, what are you doing out here? Why aren't you inside enjoying the wedding?" And you know how grandmothers are, you can't lie to them. Through my tears, I told her everything: how I asked for the money, how they turned me down, about Bernard and how I felt I wasn't good enough. She listened to me without interrupting, without telling me to stop crying or that I was being silly. She just let me let it all out. Then she said something to me that I will never forget: "Zachary, sometimes people see potential in others because they see themselves in them. Your father probably sees a young version of himself in Bernard, but that doesn't mean you're not capable. You are different, and being different is not a bad thing, it is just different." He squeezed my hand and added, "You are intelligent and hardworking. One day you are going to create something incredible, only it will be in your own way." It sounds like a cliché, but it was exactly what I needed to hear at that moment. The next day, I was still processing my emotions, half motivated by my grandmother's words, half devastated by everything that had happened. I was on my sofa when my phone rang. It was my grandfather. My grandfather is not one to call just to chat, so I got worried. I asked him if everything was all right. He said yes and that he wanted to see me. Without asking any more questions, I said, "Okay, Grandpa, I'll be there in 2 hours. My grandmother greeted me with a warm smile when I arrived. Come in, Zachary, your grandfather is in his study. He was sitting in his chair when I entered, but he immediately got up to give me a hug, which helped me relax a little. My grandfather got straight to the point. Your grandmother told me what happened at the wedding and how you feel about your business plans. Oh, so that's what it was. I nodded, trying to keep my composure. He continued, I want you to know something, Zachary. I started my first business with nothing but an old van and a loan from my uncle. It wasn't easy, and everyone thought I was going to fail, but I didn't. Do you know why? I shook my head. Because someone believed in me. Sometimes one person can change everything. By this point I was on the verge of tears, and that was when he opened his desk drawer, took out his checkbook, wrote something down and handed me a check. I was transfixed. I won't reveal the exact amount, but it was considerable. It didn't cover everything I needed for my cybersecurity company, but it was enough to get started, enough to make a real difference. I stared at the check for what seemed like an eternity. Finally, I managed to say, Grandpa, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Zachary, he replied. This isn't just money, it's trust. I'm investing in you. And then I lost control. Yes, more tears. I tried not to cry uncontrollably, but my grandfather simply came over and hugged me. Make us proud, Zach. All the way back, I kept looking at the check in the passenger seat. It wasn't just money. It was proof that someone believed in me. With my grandfather's seed capital, I knew I had to be very careful with every penny. No fancy offices or expensive furniture. We started small. I contacted my best friends, Adam and Lewis. We pooled our few savings and rented a small office in a not-so-good part of town. But it was ours. The first 2 years were very hard. We worked between 14 and 16 hours a day, with almost no breaks at the weekend, surviving on instant food and vending machine snacks. Lewis spent all day on calls, Adam immersed himself in the code, and I did everything: marketing, customer service, solving technical problems at 3 in the morning, whatever was necessary. Our first major client was a medium-sized financial company that had suffered a computer attack. We managed to repair their systems, recover their information and prevent future attacks. That project gave us enough money to move to a slightly better office. Little by little, we gained recognition. Recommendations multiplied and we began to attract larger clients. About 4 years later, we achieved our first major milestone. We had enough revenue to expand. We opened a second office in a nearby city, and a year later, a third in another major city. We were no longer a startup struggling to survive. We were an established company. Around that time, we also started offering cybersecurity consulting services. It was the natural next step. Companies didn't just want us to fix problems, they wanted us to proactively prevent them. And the consulting revenue was really good. 5 years after starting the business, I was finally able to pay my grandparents back. I went to their house, check in hand, and said, "This is yours, with interest." But I didn't stop there. No, they had supported me when no one else did. So I bought them a new house. Nothing fancy, but comfortable and cozy, in a neighborhood they had always wanted. Watching them tour their new home, pointing out the details they liked, was one of the most rewarding moments of my life. While my cybersecurity company prospered, Bernard's hotel did not fare as well. The pandemic hit the hospitality industry hard and his business never fully recovered. Apparently, my parents gave him more money to help him through that difficult period, but despite his efforts, and I honestly feel sorry for him, the hotel eventually closed. Do I feel sorry for Bernard? Yes, of course. Running a business is difficult, and sometimes even the greatest effort is not enough. But did I also feel a little satisfaction? Yes, I'm human after all. It wasn't about Bernard's failure. It was about proving that I could be successful even though my parents didn't believe in me. Family gatherings feel different now. I admit it, I show off a little, not in an arrogant look at me, I'm better than you kind of way, but more like remember when everyone thought I would fail? Well, look at this. Last weekend we celebrated my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary, and since I literally owe them everything I have today, I wanted it to be a perfect day. I spared no expense. I hired a beautiful hotel ballroom, the best catering service, a live band and invited practically everyone, friends, family and even old neighbors I hadn't seen in years. Honestly, organizing this event excited me more than closing some of my biggest business deals. I couldn't stop thinking about how these two wonderful people took a chance on me when no one else did. The party was spectacular. Everyone was elegantly dressed, the food was exquisite and my grandparents radiated happiness. But then my parents arrived. At some point during the night, I heard my father talking to an old friend. When his friend commented that he should be proud of me, he responded by talking about family values and how his support and guidance had set me on the right path. He also mentioned that it was practically a family business now. I'm sorry? What? I was stunned. I thought I had heard wrong, but no. Throughout the night I kept hearing snippets of conversations where my parents presented themselves as the pillars of my success. We always knew he would do something great. We supported him every step of the way. That's how we are in the family, we help each other. And the most incredible thing, my father actually said, it's all thanks to the family's initial support. At that moment I wanted to scream, but I held back. Look, I didn't expect my parents to get down on their knees and apologize to me in tears or anything like that, but for them to take credit for something that they actively refused to support, after telling me directly that I was no good for business, that really annoyed me. I tried to enjoy the rest of the night, but I was really angry, so I changed my speech. Originally, I had planned something simple. An emotional tribute to Grandma and Grandpa, but after everything I had heard that night, I knew I couldn't let it go. I started lightly. I told a few jokes, mentioned that their marriage was older than the internet, and talked about the love and respect they've always had for each other. But then I got serious, and this was the crucial part of my speech. You know, Grandma and Grandpa didn't just build a life together. They built a legacy. A legacy of love, trust and, most importantly, belief in people. When I had a dream and everyone else shut the door in my face, these two opened theirs. They didn't just believe in my idea. They believed in me, and I owe everything I have today to their faith in me when no one else did. I paused. My parents looked at me with frozen smiles on their faces. So tonight, I want to make a toast to Grandma and Grandpa, the only two people who believed in me when nobody else did. This success is theirs, not anybody else's. Grandma was crying. Grandpa nodded with that calm and proud smile of his, and my parents, well, they were smiling through gritted teeth. About 15 minutes after the speech, my father found me near the dessert table. He was practically yelling at me, "What the hell was that speech about, Zachary? Were you trying to humiliate us in front of everyone?" I almost laughed. Humiliate you? I just told the truth. You didn't believe in me, but Grandma and Grandpa did. My mother joined in the argument. You didn't have to expose our family business like that in front of everyone. You made us look very bad. By that point, I was already biting my tongue trying not to explode, but then my father said, "You act as if we hadn't done anything for you. We gave you a good life, a good education, how dare you make us look like the villains in your little success story?" And that was it. That was the moment I lost my temper. I didn't shout at first, but I definitely raised my voice. You know what? You didn't believe in me. You had the money. You gave it to Bernard for his hotel without thinking twice. And when he failed, you gave him even more. But when I came to you with my idea, you said I wasn't the entrepreneurial type. Do you know how much that hurt me? By then, I realized that the room had gone completely silent. The guests were watching. My cousin Bernard, the one with the failed hotel, was drinking uncomfortably in the corner as if he wanted to disappear. My father pointed at me and said, "You're being ungrateful," and I snapped back at him. Ungrateful for what? For their doubts? For their lack of faith? No, I'm not ungrateful. I'm just saying out loud what everyone already knows. I had finished. My chest felt tight. My face was hot and I realized that I had just caused a scene at what was supposed to be a celebration for my grandparents. I looked around and saw my grandmother looking at me with that soft, sad expression. Not disappointed, just sad. My grandfather had his arm around her as if he were trying to keep her calm. That's when the guilt hit me. I didn't say another word. I just turned around and left the ballroom. I didn't even grab my coat. I got in my car, slammed the door and sat there for a few minutes, staring at the steering wheel, trying to calm down. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying the argument over and over in my head, and the next morning I got a text from my grandmother. "Zachary, we love you very much. Please don't feel bad about last night. We understand, but that didn't really make me feel any better. I've been thinking about this a lot." Reddit. Did I cross a line? Did I ruin a night that was supposed to be for my grandparents? Update 1. Hi Reddit, it's me again. Things have gotten worse instead of better. I thought that after that night we would all need some time to calm down and then we could have a calm conversation like adults, but no. My parents decided to take this to the next level. It all started gradually. My cousin sent me a message saying, "Hey, Zach, is it true that you emotionally manipulated Grandma and Grandpa to get money?" That's what Uncle said. At first I laughed because it sounded absurd, but then more calls started coming in and my aunt wrote to me on Facebook saying she was disappointed in how I had used my grandparents' emotions to get money out of them. I couldn't believe it. Really? I immediately called my grandmother because I needed to make sure she was okay. She said to me, "Don't worry about what other people are saying. We know the truth and that's all that matters." She really is the sweetest person in the world, and hearing that calmed me down a little, but I couldn't ignore the fact that my parents were spreading a distorted version of the facts to the whole family. Although I don't like confrontation, despite what my outburst on the anniversary might have seemed, this time I couldn't stay silent. I called my parents and asked them, "What are you telling everyone? Why are people calling me saying that I manipulated Grandma and Grandpa?" My mother replied, "Well, you cried with them, didn't you? You made them feel bad for you. That's manipulation." I was about to cry when I said to her, "Are you serious? I cried because I was hurt, because they made me feel like I wasn't enough. That's not manipulation. Those are just normal emotions." I heard my father in the background saying, "You can explain it any way you like, Zachary, but everyone sees you for what you really are now." I told them, "Okay, say what you want. I'm tired of trying to explain it to you," and I hung up. I thought hanging up would make me feel better, but it didn't. Over the next week, the rumors got worse. One relative said they'd heard that I'd threatened to cut off contact with my grandparents if they didn't give me money. Another said that I'd boasted about having manipulated them and that I'd laughed about it afterwards. I felt like I was in a nightmare. How do you fight against something like that? It's so ridiculous that it almost seems like a joke, except that it's not funny when the people you care about start to believe it. Even Bernard, yes, that cousin, called me one day. He said, "Hey, man, I know things are tense right now, but couldn't you talk to your uncle and aunt to sort this out?" I wanted to shout at him, "Bro, they funded you twice and you still failed, and I'm the problem?" But I just said to him, "There's nothing to sort out, Bernard. They know the truth. They just choose to ignore it." That call with Bernard was the last straw. I realized that my parents weren't going to stop. They weren't going to back down or admit their mistake. And as much as it hurt, I needed to walk away for my own mental health. I sent my parents a message, "I can't do this anymore. They've decided to spread these lies and I can't keep trying to convince them otherwise. I need to distance myself from this relationship for now. I love them, but I can't let this keep hurting me." And that was it. I blocked them on social media because they were making indirect posts about me. And I stopped responding to relatives who were just looking for gossip. I'm in a strange situation now. I'll let you know if anything changes. Update 2. Hello, Reddit. It's been a while. I wish I had better news, but life has been difficult. My grandfather passed away last month. It wasn't sudden or dramatic. He went to sleep and didn't wake up. It was peaceful in a way, but it hit me hard. He was one of the few people in my family who really believed in me when no one else did. Losing him was like losing my guide in the middle of a storm. When I got the news, I quickly packed and drove to my grandmother's house. She looked so fragile when I arrived. But she still gave me a little smile and a hug. I don't think I had ever hugged anyone so tightly. The days leading up to the funeral were like being in a fog. People had to be called, arrangements made and 1,000 details taken care of. My parents were also there. And although we were cordial, there was a strange tension in the air. As if we all knew there were unresolved issues, but no one had the energy to bring them up while we were dealing with our grief. The funeral was really beautiful. Hundreds of people attended. My grandfather was truly an exceptional person. Seeing how many lives he had touched was impressive. Former business partners, childhood friends, neighbors, people from all over came to say goodbye. I tried to stay strong during the eulogy, but I broke down halfway through. My grandmother held my hand the whole time and I am very grateful because I don't think I could have finished without her support. This is where things got complicated. My grandfather wasn't extremely rich, but he had a few properties, including a beautiful house on the lake. It's the kind of place you'd see on a postcard. With a wooden terrace, large windows and a spectacular view of the lake surrounded by trees. My father spent a lot of time there when he was a child. I also have fond memories of running along the pier, fishing with Grandpa and roasting marshmallows by the fire. During the reading of the will, the lawyers listed the assets until they reached the lake house. My grandfather left it to me and my cousin Laura. Just so you understand, Laura is the daughter of my father's sister. She is an incredible person, very kind, down to earth and we get along very well. But when my father heard Zachary and Laura will share ownership of the lake house, I saw his jaw tighten. He didn't say anything at the time, but his expression said it all. He was furious. After the reading, he left without speaking to me. My mother followed him and I was left there uncomfortable with Laura and my grandmother. Over the next few days, while I was staying with my grandmother, my father avoided me completely. If we were in the same room, he acted as if I were invisible. My mother gave me half-hearted smiles, But she didn't talk much either. It seems crazy to me because I didn't ask for the lake house. I didn't even know that Grandpa would leave it to me, but somehow my father saw it as another personal attack. As if my grandfather was taking sides in an imaginary war. Laura and I talked about this one night over tea. She confessed that she also felt uncomfortable because her mother, my father's sister, was not very happy with the will either, although at least she had not chosen total silence. One day, while I was helping my grandmother sort through some of my grandfather's things, she sat me down and said, "Your grandfather loved your father, Zachary, very much, but he also saw how hard you worked, how hard you tried to prove yourself. He wanted you to have something that meant a lot to him." I think she knew that I felt guilty about the whole situation. As if I had unintentionally created a bigger rift with my father, or if Grandpa had unintentionally made things worse by leaving me the house. But Grandma said something to me that stuck with me: "Your grandfather wasn't choosing sides. He was choosing love. He loved you and he loved Laura. And he wanted you both to have a place where you could always feel close to him." That night, before going home, I met my father in the kitchen. He was making tea and I went to get a glass of water. There was an awkward moment of silence until he spoke. "You know, Zachary, that lake house was supposed to stay in the family. It was supposed to be ours." I replied, "It still is, Dad. I'm not going to sell it. I'm not going to turn it into a rental property. It's still ours." He didn't reply. He just stirred his tea, put down his spoon and left. I don't know what I expected, an apology, an argument, maybe even a hug. But I got nothing. Update 3. Hello everyone. This will be my last post. There are things I need to sort out now that my father has decided to take me to court. He believes that the lake house belongs to him, even though my grandfather left it to me and Laura. I can't go into detail because everything is very legal now, but I will give you an idea of the situation. It all started when my father started turning up at my house unannounced, demanding that I do the right thing and give him the lake house. At first I thought he was just upset and wanted to talk. But when I refused, he started making threats. He told me that the will was wrong and that I was wrong not to share the house with him. It was as if something had changed in him. Then the legal documents arrived. I won't go into details, but basically my father's lawyers sent me papers accusing me of obtaining the house unfairly and demanding that I hand it over to him. He says it's his inheritance, not mine, and that I manipulated Grandpa into leaving it to me. It's absurd, isn't it? Grandpa clearly wanted Laura and me to have the house, but what hurts the most is how this is affecting the family. My mother is trying to mediate, trying to convince me to give in and hand over the house to get through this. She still doesn't fully see what my father is doing and I'm honestly tired of explaining it to her. As for my relationship with my father, it's over. I tried to talk to him several times hoping we could work it out like adults. Every time I tried, he just got angrier. He has insulted me, blamed me for everything and made it clear that he has no intention of backing down. I'm at a point where I don't think there's any going back. I don't think we can repair what has been broken. Thank you all for your support. It means a lot to me. This will be my last post on the subject, but I wanted to thank you for being there and offering your advice, especially to those of you who have been through similar situations. I appreciate it more than you know.